Hi guys, and welcome to the start of a brand new series made entirely using an AI app. This is Semajically AI. In this series, you will see a new AI story in each episode. This is the very first episode, and our first story is entitled The Beach Incident. It was a boiling hot day in July, and several families had flocked to the Mid-Hampton beach and were all enjoying the fun. Lucy Morgan was surfing, as she usually did each time she visited the beach. She was a very beautiful young woman who had lots of male suitors.
Her teenage younger sister Daisy was water skiing for the first time since learning how to do so. Their parents, Emma and Gerald, were just sunbathing like most of the other parents.
Bing Riley was having a swim in the sea to keep cool. He was a very level-headed teenager who always tried to see the good in others.
His younger sister Mozilla was a high-spirited, red-headed preteen girl who was building a massive sandcastle with their little cousin Vicky.
They were trying to build the biggest sandcastle on the whole beach.
That was until a troublemaking 10-year-old boy came over and started stomping all over it. This boy's name was Luke Stenner, and he was the naughtiest boy in the neighborhood. When Mozilla tried to stop him, he just gave her a dirty look and told her to bugger off. When their families saw this, they rushed over to help. Mozilla's parents, Siri and Alexa, managed to pull her away just in time to prevent a fight from breaking out, along with little Vicky, their niece. Breaking off for a moment to point out that the Stenners are actually a creation of my best friend Darren Stratton. Thanks, bro. Appreciated. Back to the story at hand, where Luke's family, Alexander, his father, Tricia, his mother, and Amanda, his older sister, had all come to stop him from causing any real damage by holding him back. "What on earth were you thinking, Luke?" Alexander demanded after seeing the trashed sandcastle. Luke just stood there smirking at him. "Luke, I am your father!" yelled Alexander. "Whatever, Darth Vader!" scowled Luke. "Don't you dare talk to your father like that!" Tricia scolded. Luke was in no mood for a lecture, so he tried to walk away, but Amanda blocked his way. "And where do you think you're going?" she asked. This is when the incident happened, as Luke shoved her backwards and she fell into the sea. Luke was too fast for anyone to stop, as he rushed forward and grabbed Amanda up, grabbed her by the hair and dragged her crying into the water, where he started hitting and punching her around, and the two fought as they got out into the sea.
Lucy and Daisy Morgan jumped in and tried to pull them apart, but were unsuccessful as Luke thumped Amanda, causing her to fall backwards and disappear under the water. She began to panic because she couldn't swim and disappeared under the surface.
Lucy dove down and pulled her out, summoning the lifeguard who rushed over to help them, while Daisy caught a hold of Luke and dragged him back to the beach. She was furious with him for what he'd just done to his own sister.
She scolded him, calling him a monster, and told him he belonged in prison. Luckily, they were able to save Amanda's life, but they had to send her to the hospital.
Unbeknownst to anyone, a group of 4 very powerful people had seen the whole thing on their view screen and come down to see what they could do. The special thing about these 4 people was the fact that they were all immortal, and each had a different form of immortality.
Stephen Marsh was also known as the Eternal Fisherman, whose immortality caused him to rapidly age and die, only to revert back to his youthful appearance and return to life.
Amber Coleman, the medieval noblewoman who never aged, and respawned each time she died, and returned to life in a forest fully healed, and had to change her name every time this happened to protect her identity.
Jenny, the woman who could regenerate, who could survive any form of death by regenerating her body and returning to life as long as there was something left of her for her regeneration to be triggered. And a very mysterious male immortal whose immortality was just as much of a mystery as the man himself. When they saw what had happened, they all gave Luke Stenner such a telling off for his dangerous behavior. He refused to believe them when they told him they were immortal, and decided to test it out on Jenny by grabbing a jagged stick and stabbing her through the stomach, causing her to splutter, collapse, and die, only for her stomach to regenerate, bringing her back to life.
As she got back to her feet and brushed herself off, Luke prepared his cap gun to shoot Amber, only to end up shooting Stephen instead, causing him to rapidly age and drop dead, only for his body to revert to his youthful appearance, and he stood back up, alive, whole, and still immortal.
Now you've had your proof. You have to stop this dangerous behavior.
Luke just shrugged and walked away.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the second episode of the series, and tonight's story, The Inhabitants of the Magic Mansion. Here we go. Deep within the woods, hidden by very powerful magical barriers, there stood a huge mansion. This was no ordinary mansion. It was inhabited by a whole host of wizards, witches, and other magical beings. It was owned by a very powerful old wizard named Osiris the Great.
And he was renting out the rooms to his magical tenants, most of whom were powerful witches and wizards in their own right.
Frank Flitterbloom was one of his favourite tenants, as he was a young wizard with great power and magical knowledge, and whose brand of magic was chiefly maintenance.
He always paid his rent on time and normally got to upgrade his room as a result.
He worked as a magical maintenance man, for which he earned 1,450 gold in weekly wages, and paid 650 gold a month for his rent, which was low considering his wages.
Zirconia Cubits was a young witch who was very good with animals and looked after all the magical creatures Osiris kept in the grounds of the mansion.
There were phoenixes, a herd of Pegasus horses, fairies, centaurs, gnomes, and mermaids.
She was so good with the magical creatures that she had tamed every phoenix in the grounds.
The only creature she wasn't allowed to work with due to their dangerous nature were the dragons who lived out in the mansion woods.
She earned 2,458 gold a month in wages and paid 650 rent every month.
Her brand of magic allowed her to talk to and understand whichever creature she was caring for at any time.
All the magical tenants of the Magic Mansion had many magical talents and were all as important as each other.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the third episode, and the title of this story is Justin's Incredible Adventure in Time. Justin Barnes was a young man who was prone to daydreaming about time travel and imagine what he would do if he had a time machine. His parents constantly told him to stop dreaming and come down to earth. Time travel doesn't exist as we all know, or does it? Well, today was Justin's lucky day, but he didn't know it yet. As he drove to work that morning, he passed under a tunnel when he was stopped by a man in a grey suit with a silver wing-shaped badge on his lapel. He gave Justin an attachment to put on his dashboard. It was a dashboard time machine, which Justin attached to his dashboard straight away. The man explained to him how the time machine worked and warned him not to interfere with history, as even the tiniest change could alter the future in ways he couldn't imagine. Thanking him for the warning, Justin shook his hand and drove on. As he drove down the motorway, he activated his new time machine and set the time circuits for September 8, 1976, and drove on very fast, only to be blasted back in time. He arrived in a very busy street full of people dressed in the clothes one might expect to see in the 1970s. As he slowed down, he got a clear reading of the time and location of his arrival. He had indeed traveled back to September 8, 1976, and needed to be extra careful not to get involved with anything, as this was his grandfather Ross's childhood he'd come back to. Ross was only 7 years old at this time, and Justin knew he must not get involved with his life now, otherwise he would not come to exist. He switched off the time machine, giving it the appearance of a detachable radio clock, and detached it to prevent it from being stolen. He then parked his car and decided to look around. He walked around the city, being careful not to let anyone see him, but it wasn't long before someone did and stopped to talk to him. The person who noticed him was a young woman named Joanne Kraling, and she was most interested in him as he didn't look like he belonged there. She invited him out to lunch at the local cafe and asked him where he was from. He told her his name was Justin Barnes, and he was visiting from the year 2024. She looked at him thinking, is this man crazy? He believes he's from 48 years in the future, before looking at him and saying, are you saying you're from 48 years in the future? She asked him. He confirmed that he was indeed saying he came from the future, and she naturally thought he was crazy, telling him they both knew that wasn't true. Realizing his mistake, he made a dash for his car and made it back, reattached the time machine, set it for his home era, and sped off into the future. He arrived safely back in 2024, right after the man who gave him the time machine had disappeared. He drove to his house and parked his car, only to be approached by the present-day middle-aged Joanne Kraling, who asked him if he was okay.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 4th episode, and we are about to tell you this story, The Eternal Fisherman. Let me take you back in time to medieval England, where a young fisherman was just casting off in the hopes of catching lots of fish for his family's dinner that night. As he cast his rod into the lake, he sat back and relaxed as he fished. Everything was normal that day, clear blue sky and a brightly shining sun. That was until the sun randomly disappeared behind a cloud, the sky went grey, and suddenly a storm began to brew out of nowhere. As he reeled in his rod without catching anything and rowed frantically back to land, he was suddenly struck by a very powerful flash of bright light, surging him with some strong, unknown force before throwing him in the lake with a splash. Being a good swimmer, he managed to swim back to the shore and staggered for a bit before collapsing to the ground as though dead. Within seconds, his rapidly aged body reverted back to his youthful appearance and regained consciousness, breathing deeply. He wondered what had happened to him as he walked into his town to buy some fish from the market, only to be struck by an arrow that had gone astray, causing him to rapidly age and drop dead once again. The same thing happened as before. His body reverted back to his youthful appearance and he returned to life. He didn't have time to wonder what was going on as the people of his town grew suspicious of him, thinking he was in league with the devil, and ran him out of town. Over the next decade, he kept a low profile, trying not to let himself be seen, only to find himself being hunted down in an angry mob and burned at the stake, only to rapidly age, die, revert back to being a young man, and return to life for the 3rd time. He made a run for it before they tried to burn him again. It was then that he realized that this was going to keep happening every time he suffered a mortal wound. He'd rapidly age, die, revert back to his youthful appearance and return to life. He was now immortal and had to go into hiding for most of his life. In 1945, he finally came out of hiding, assumed the name of Stephen Marsh, and enrolled himself in university to study history, and graduated in 1949, now a fully trained historian, and couldn't wait to share his expertise. But he was going to be very careful not to reveal his true identity to anyone. By 1953, he was hired as a history professor at Merneghan University, and his classes became a hit with students. They wondered how their professor could look so young, but didn't let him know they secretly knew his true identity. Over the next 7 decades, he taught generations of history students and eventually decided to retire for a quiet life. That's when he discovered there was a group of 3 other immortals operating in secret to protect the world. Amber Coleman, Jenny, and a mysterious man whose identity was shrouded in mystery as well as his immortality. They invited him to join them, briefed him on what they actually did, and he accepted his place amongst them. That very same day, they received a red alert from the beach in Midhampton and had to go and intervene. There, they met and had to help discipline a troublemaking 10-year-old boy named Luke Stenner for his dangerous behavior after he'd tried to drown his own sister. A reminder that the Stenners were created by my best friend, Darren Stratton. Thanks again, brother. Appreciated. This episode is a prequel to the first episode, explaining the backstory of Stephen Marsh, the Eternal Fisherman.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Semajically AI for the 5th episode. We are about to return to the town of Midhampton to meet and spend time with one of the many families. Let's get ready to meet. The Allen family. Tony and Serena Allen are a happy married couple who live at number 18 Richmond Drive. They have a young daughter named Brittany, who is 11 years old and can be quite naughty at times, and this was one of those times. It all started first thing this morning as she woke up. Serena entered to say good morning and lay out some clothes for her.
Come on you, it's time to get up.
But I've only just woken up.
Serena was not in the mood for messing around and put her hands on her hips.
We don't laze about in this house. You know that perfectly well. So get out of that bed and put on these clothes this instant and stop being naughty.
She scolded before leaving her room. Brittany crossly got out of bed and got dressed.
So unfair.
She stopped as she stomped downstairs.
Brittany, please don't be stroppy.
Shut up, Dad.
And please don't speak to me like that.
Shut up, Dad.
This time it was Serena who reacted to their daughter's rudeness. She smacked her on the wrist.
Young lady, how dare you speak to your father like that? That was extremely rude of you.
Whatever.
Serena smacked her again.
How dare you shout at me? That was very rude and naughty of you. If you don't stop being naughty like a toddler, I will turn you over my knee and smack your bottom.
After breakfast, Serena placed Brittany in the naughty corner like a toddler, explained why she was being placed there, and left her there for 11 minutes. 11 minutes later, Brittany apologized for her behavior and was allowed out of the corner. Brittany then decided to do some drawing with her squeezy felt tip pens. While doing this, she accidentally squeezed some black ink on the wall.
Whoops,
she said as she inspected what had happened. Rather than go and tell either of her parents about it, she decided to draw on the wall. Tony came to check on her and was disappointed in her.
Oh, Brittany, what have you done? Surely you know it's wrong to draw on walls.
When Serena came in and saw the drawing on the wall, she knew Brittany must have done it. She smacked her around the head and stood before her with her hands on her hips.
You are grounded, young lady, do you hear me? That's very naughty and babyish. How dare you draw on the wall?
She scolded, sat down, turned Brittany over her knee and smacked her bottom.
You really are a very naughty girl.
She scolded. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 6th episode, and you are about to hear this story, A Trip to the Moon. When I was young, I would dream a lot about finding a rocket and going to the moon, and my parents would tell me it was a pipe dream. But then, one day, my teacher told us we were going to be visiting the Space Administration, and they were going to show us a space launch. The school told me that if I wanted to go with them, I had to be good and work hard, as this trip was not for naughty girls who slacked off on their schoolwork and played their teachers up. So I buckled down and started working hard and behaved as well as I could, earning my right to go on the special trip. The next Thursday, we headed off to the Space Administration for our tour. Our tour guide was a very level-headed man named Buzz Benjamin. He showed us the interior of one of their space shuttles, and I was most impressed with it, as he told us that this was the shuttle 3 of their finest astronauts would be launched into space that afternoon, and they were being sent to the moon. At lunchtime, my teacher noticed I was missing, so everyone had to search for me. I was trying on a spacesuit and it was very comfortable, and then I snuck aboard the mission to the moon and hid in the shuttle. And so, unbeknownst to them, I was launched into space with them, and I managed to stay hidden until we landed on the moon and snuck out onto the moon's surface with them. That's when the 3 astronauts on the mission noticed me, caught me before I could escape, and radioed mission control to let them know they'd found me and caught me sneaking up to the moon with them. They then sent me back to base with some astronauts who had come to take me back to my class in the Space Administration headquarters to be disciplined by the man in charge. And my teacher, who told me she knew it was a mistake to trust me on this trip, as she knew I was going to be naughty. I was 12 years old at the time and had wandered off like a little child. My parents were livid when they found out what I did, and I was grounded for several weeks for my disgraceful behaviour. I was banned from all school outings from then on as well. It was very well deserved now that I look back on it.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 7th episode, and we're about to tell you the story of Destiny. Our story begins in London, England in 1884, when Marion and Patrick Stewart were welcoming their newborn daughter Destiny to the world. They loved her very much and wanted her to have a good life. In 1885, she started walking and talking, but she could only say 2 words at that point. In 1886, she was playing in her playpen when Marion walked past her, and she sat there looking rigid, and her eyes glazed over, showing her a vision of Marion tripping on a wooden block, and yelled, "Careful, Mummy." Marion stopped, picked up her block and put it back in the playpen before picking Destiny up and hugging her. "Thank you, darling," she said. In 1887, she was splashing about in the sink as Marion bathed her when her eyes glazed over, showing her a vision of Patrick being trampled by horses. And this freaked her out so much that Marion had to get her out of the sink, dry, dress, and comfort her. That's when a policeman came and told her Patrick had been trampled by horses, meaning he was dead, which was very devastating. In 1893, Destiny was now a healthy young girl of 9 years old and was out running errands for Marion when she received a vision of Marion being attacked and killed by a mugger. She then rushed off to try and save her, but unfortunately she got there too late, as Marion had died in the attack, leaving her orphaned, which meant she was going to be taken to a workhouse. That was until a kindly man named Steve.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 8th episode, and this is the story of Milton Keynes, the oldest man. Here we go. Milton Keynes was born in London in the year 1864 to Stephen Keynes and a supernatural mother that even he didn't know. I'll tell you, his mother was actually a fairy who broke her world's most important law about not actually getting involved with a human's life and having children with them. When Milton was born, Stephen had everything to be proud of, but wasn't allowed to reveal to his son who his mother was until he was old enough to understand it. In 1865, after a year of living quietly, Chronica, Milton's mother, was arrested by her world's council and sent back there to stand trial. Milton was only a year old at the time, so he didn't understand what was going on. In 1869, Milton began his basic education under the tutelage of Mr. Richard Armstrong, who would tutor him in literacy, maths and social skills by bringing his young daughter Jane to share his lessons and play with him, and the two became fast friends. In 1875, as he turned 11, Milton was invited to attend Sherlock School for the next 7 years, and he accepted his place at the school. Jane, on the other hand, was going to St. Albright School for Girls, as Richard didn't trust co-educational schools, so the friends were separated during their school years. They didn't like it, but were forced to accept it with the promise to reunite every holiday, and after they'd left school. Between 1875 and 1882, Milton attended Sherlock School as a member of Ambrose House. He excelled in his studies and was the best behaved student in the school, becoming a dormitory monitor in his 3rd year, prefect in his 5th, and head boy in his 7th. He ran the corridors with an iron fist. At the same time, Jane was attending St. Albright School for Girls as a member of Angel Wing's house, and a very studious pupil. She went against the rules, becoming a junior prefect in her 3rd year, senior prefect in her 5th, and head girl in her 7th. They kept their promise to reunite every holiday, Christmas, Easter and summer. By the time they left their respective schools in 1882, they were thrilled to be fully reunited. Realizing they were in love, they started dating. In 1884, he married Jane, and it was, the happiest day of their lives. He was also now a bank officer, and they had a steady flow of income. They were a very happy couple and loved each other very much. In 1886, he became a father to a son named Michael, and they loved him to pieces. In 1889, he became a father to a daughter named Mary, and they loved her to absolute pieces. Their family was now complete, as they'd only planned to have a small family. In 1898, Jane joined the suffragette movement in an attempt to give women equal rights with men. Milton was actually in favour of this movement, as he believed it was unfair for women to be treated as inferior to men. In 1903, after many years of wondering who his birth mother was, he got confirmation when he came into possession of a photograph of him as a baby with both of his parents. He saw from it that his birth mother had been a fairy, as he could see by the wings she was keeping still. This shocked him to the core. He was half fairy, and he was only just learning this now, after 39 years, Why couldn't it have been sooner? He was furious with his father for keeping this from him all these years. Jane tried to calm down, but she couldn't, and neither could their children, Mike and Mary, who were mesmerized by this revelation. Their paternal grandmother was a real fairy, an actual magical being, but sadly they were never going to meet her, as her race executed her for having a child with a human. In his fury, Milton unleashed a powerful wave of magic, which ended up freezing time. After realizing this, he released a second wave, resuming time. Years went by as Mike and Mary grew up and left home to start their own lives, going on to have families of their own, making him a proud grandfather, and he adored his grandchildren. In 1923, Jane passed away from a terminal illness which was very devastating, and he went into a very deep depression. In 1932, he decided to write his will and had it looked over by his lawyer. In 1933, he retired from his job at the bank to live quietly with the rest of his family. In 1935, he willingly moved into a retirement home as he felt he needed to be there. Many more years passed, and he found himself burying his children and then his grandchildren, all before he died, devastated by the knowledge that he'd outlived all of his loved ones. He saw all his milestone birthdays, 75 in 1939-80, in 1944-85, in 1949-90, in 1954-95, in 1959-100, in 1964, and so on and so on. He reached his 150th birthday in 2014, which amazed both him and everyone in the world. His health started to decline a year later, but this was a very slow process. Here we are now in 2024, and Milton is currently 160 years old and still alive, but only just. Oh no, he's just passed away. Wait a minute, what's happening? He's levitating and his body is rejuvenating and revitalizing him. This must be his magical blood taking control and bringing him back to life as a magical being.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 9th episode, and tonight we try something different. Rather than presenting one story, we have 2 of them for you in anthology. Let's get on with it. The Wishing Slide. What if I told you there was a park just down the street from this ordinary house that contained a slide that could grant the wishes of anyone who used it? Before you go blabbing it about, this was a very special slide indeed that stood in an otherwise ordinary playground. And this is what a group of youngsters found out when they decided to test out their speed sliding down it. Their names were Joe Clive, Zena Bones, Simon Bridges and Lolly Sweet.
As she sat at the top, she slid down at her top speed, and without thinking, she said she could teleport and found herself standing by the swings.
They were all shocked and wanted to know how she did that.
Simon took the next go, being the middle child of the group, as he slid down at his top speed, just wishing privately that he could travel through time, only to suddenly vanish from the playground altogether. But he was just there at the top of slide. How could he just vanish into thin air?
Zena took her go as the second oldest of her group. As she slid down at her top, she said how cool it would be to see through time, and no sooner had she said it, she got a vision of the near future and saw Simon catching up with them as they were walking home at 6:30 that evening before her focus returned to the present as the oldest of group. Joe took his turn.
As he slid down at his top speed, he wished he could have an expanded lifespan, but didn't specify how much extra life he wanted. So he was granted an unspecified extension to his lifespan, complete with healing abilities.
At 6:30 that evening, as they were walking home, Simon caught up with them, just as Zena had predicted. All 4 friends discussed the slide and the powers it had given them. As they crossed the road, a motorcycle rushed by, running over Joe, killing him instantly. But not for long, as he regained consciousness and got to his feet, healing from his injuries as they made it to the other side. The slide had granted all of them their wishes. Lolly could now teleport, Simon could now travel through time, Zena could now see into time, and Joe could now live much longer than anyone and heal from his injuries. As he didn't specify a length for the extension to his life to last, it could last another 2 centuries, or he might now be immortal, who knows. Walk into the future. Ray Jones was a young man who was very happy in his life. He was just starting his career as a history teacher and lived with his loving girlfriend Melinda Cork, who was a junior doctor who had just started her job at the local hospital. They both had the day off that Tuesday, so they decided to go for a walk. As they started walking down their street, they felt an odd sensation. That's when they rounded a corner to see a flying car jetting overhead and found themselves staring at cars that looked like flying saucers parked in landing bays and kids floating around in bubbles.
Wondering what was going on, they entered the newsagent to query it, only for the shopkeeper to recognize them despite never having seen them before, or so they thought as they saw the name on the shopkeeper's name tag and realized it was his future self. A middle-aged woman appeared behind the counter and recognized them too. This was the future version of Melinda. They checked the date on the closest newspaper, only to discover that they'd walked through time into the year 2045. They'd traveled 21 years into the future, which freaked them out. That's when 2 teenagers approached them, a boy and a girl. Their names were Leroy and Olivia, their own future children. Deciding they'd seen enough, they finally left the shop and went back the way they came. And sure enough, they returned to their present time of 2024. They decided not to share details of their time travel walk, as nobody would ever believe them.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 10th episode and head straight to our next story, Ryan Morgan and the monster on the chair. Ever since Ryan Morgan was small, he has been scared to death of the idea of monsters hiding in cupboards and under beds. He just didn't like them at all, even though he knew they weren't real. He was 26 years old now, and had no friends because of his childhood fear which had been plaguing him for the past 2 decades. It was due to this that he couldn't be trusted to live on his own, so he had a carer who shared his flat with him. Her name was Darcy, and she was always telling him monsters didn't exist, but he didn't believe her. One night, as he was getting ready for bed, he had Darcy check his cupboards and under his bed for monsters, but there weren't any, thankfully. She tucked him in like a little boy and promised him nothing was going to happen to him before kissing him goodnight and leaving him to fall asleep. As he started to settle down, he noticed a horrible, monstrous face staring at him from the chair in the corner of the room. "The only monster in this room is a very naughty boy who won't settle down," she said calmly as she tucked him in for the 2nd time that night. "Stay put this time and no more of this nonsense about monsters," she told him before leaving the room again. He crawled to the end of his bed and unmasked the monster, only to learn it was just a doll with an ugly face. He thought about it for a moment and laughed silently to himself. He couldn't believe he'd been scared of something so ridiculous. It was finally over. No more stupid, childish fears existed in him anymore. Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 11th episode, and we have our first sequel story in Beach Incident 2, The Aftermath. We return to Midhampton Beach, where the 4 immortals had just intervened in an incident that young Luke Stenner was caught causing and were still disciplining him for his dangerous behavior. Part of this involved revealing their immortality and proving it to him. His parents, Alex and Tricia, had since rushed his sister Amanda to the hospital while the immortals were telling him off. The lifeguard was currently telling him off for what he'd done, and was even threatening to ban him from the beach forever.
"Give me one good reason why I shouldn't banish you from this beach for good,"
he scolded. Luke just stood there looking up at him with his eyes screwed up. Ty called a sweet voice from behind him. It was Lily Barrett, the teenage daughter of James and Millie Barrett. She was the youngest of their 3 children, a 14-year-old who had come to hand in a lost necklace belonging to Amanda.
"Yes, Lily, what can I do for you?"
This is Amanda Stenner's necklace. She must have been wearing it during the incident.
Before we carry on, I must do 2 things. Firstly, I remind you that the Stenners were created by my best friend Darren Stratton. He's just letting us use them. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. And secondly, to confirm the lifeguard's full name is Ty Denton. Back to the story now, and Lily had handed in Amanda Stenner's lost necklace and further incriminated Luke, who came running straight for her, but she stopped him.
Don't you dare even try to do to me what you did to your sister. You are a very violent little monster,
she scolded. giving him a karate chop which knocked him into the hands of Officer Geraint Reinsgate, who arrested him on the spot. So, Luke Stenner had been arrested for dangerous behavior, but he couldn't be sent to prison because he was underage, despite being criminally responsible.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 12th episode, and this is our story for tonight, Hampton County: The Origins. Our story begins in the year 1823, and a boat docked in a fresh new area where 3 different sized settlements stood ready to be settled in and built up. 3 siblings disembarked and looked around themselves. These were the Hampton siblings, Rupert, Midge, and Lewis. They were looking to 3 new communities in those settlements. They agreed to each whichever settlement compared to how old they were. Rupert was the oldest of the 3, so he took the largest settlement and started making it his own, naming it Upper Hampton, as he thought calling it Ruperton was a ridiculous idea. Midge was the middle child of the 3, so she took the middle-sized settlement, making it her own, and naming it Midhampton, thinking Middleton was a ridiculous name. And Lewis was the youngest of 3, so he took the smallest settlement, making it his own and naming it Lower Hampton, thinking Lewiston was a very stupid name. No sooner had they each done that, they came together at the border to the area, agreeing to call it Hampton County. People started moving into the 3 settlements, and Upper Hampton became a city, Midhampton, a town, and Lower Hampton, a village. All of this had taken place by 1830. In 1835, it was decided that a transit system was needed for people to travel from place to place, so they established a railway network. By 1837, Rupert was married to a woman named Stella, and they had a daughter named Jane. He was the only sibling to marry and have a family of his own. In 1839, they welcomed their second daughter Amelia to the world, completing their little family. An education system was set up in 1843, with a 1-room schoolhouse and a 2-room college building, which was successful for the next half-decade. By 1848, the school and college had been expanded to accommodate more students and faculty, and a university was set up in Upper Hampton to train young adults for jobs in finance, law, real estate, transportation, and more. They treated everyone equally, including the women, which made them the first to ever do that, earning them commendation for their achievements. By 1860, the communities all came together to celebrate their accomplishments and successes. Even young Jane and Amelia were very proud of their father, aunt, and uncle for all their accomplishments. Remember that Jane and Amelia were Rupert's daughters, who were 11 and 13 at the time, and they loved their lives. 30 years later, Jane was married to a man named Bob and had a son named Jack, while Amelia was married to a man named David Black and had 2 daughters named Millie and Molly, who they loved to bits. That's the story of the early years of Hampton County.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 13th episode, and we have our second sequel episode. The mysterious life of Destiny continues. Destiny had only lived with her adoptive parents, Steve and Melanie, for a couple of months, and was already feeling comfortable with them. Their family name was Libman and had allowed her to keep her original surname as a sign of respect for her dead birth parents. They loved her to pieces and wanted nothing but the best for her. Steve had pulled some strings to get her enrolled at his old school, and she was starting there the next term. The 1893 autumn term at Sir Roger's Academy was fast approaching, and she was looking forward to starting there. September soon came, and she was off to school for the first time and straight away made some friends on the school coaches, which at this time were horse-drawn carriages driven by coachmen hired by her school themselves. The head teacher was there to welcome back the existing students and welcome the new ones, including Destiny, who was the first girl to ever be accepted into the school. She was placed in the Bright Sparks class, and it soon became apparent just how right they were to place her there, as she began to pick up on what she was learning and excelling in them. Over the next 7 years, she excelled in whatever difficulty of classes she was placed in, and pioneering the school now coeducational reform, as there were now just as many girls at that school as there were boys. By the time she was 16 years old, she was ready to leave the school and enter the real world. It was the summer of 1900, and her parents, Steve and Melanie, were very proud of her for how far she'd come in the 7 years since they first took her into their home and decided to raise her as their daughter. While they were praising her, she had a vision of herself 15 years from then with a family of her own, before snapping back to the present and hugging them, saying she loved them to bits and really appreciated everything they'd done for her. They went home and spent the afternoon having a lovely time together, playing games and laughing. A few days later, she was out for a walk when she met a handsome teenage boy named Terry Ball, who thought she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. They spent time getting to know each other, realizing just how compatible they were to each other, and started an official relationship. Steve and Melanie were very happy to see their daughter happy and gave her permission to marry Terry when they were ready. In summer 1902, Destiny married Terry, and it was the best day of their lives. Steve and Melanie were very proud to see their newly married daughter and son-in-law so happy to finally be husband and wife. Destiny and Terry honeymooned in Scotland for 2 weeks before settling down in their new house just down the road from Steve and Melanie, as they wanted to live closer to their family. Hey guys, and welcome to Semajically AI. This is the 14th episode, and we have our second time travel story, Time Tossed, Matt's incredible journey to 1963. It all started one busy Wednesday morning as Matt Bolan arrived at work while his boss was briefing the team on their jobs that day. He learned that he was to run errands all day as punishment for being late, so he got started immediately by hitting the streets to start as errand boy for his boss that day, as he rushed back and forth delivering things to other companies. The day went on as he did errand after errand and started being careless with his safety, as he rushed out instead of watching out, only to be struck by a car, knocking him down and causing him whack his head on the ground. His focus started to go blurry and he passed out. When he came to, he found himself sitting in a little green spot on a bright sunny day. He stooped up and looked around himself, dazed and confused. The air around was fresh and he could smell the sea nearby, and walked across to a beach full of people having fun with their families. He walked into the town and found himself surrounded by people dressed in clothes that looked at least 60 years out of date, and cars that looked like they should be at least 60 years old but looked brand new. How could this be possible, he thought as he processed what he saw. As he passed a newspaper stand and saw a newspaper dated for July the 25th, 1963, he stood staring at it, hardly daring to believe it. Was he mad or in a coma, or had he traveled back in time? He decided to keep these thoughts to himself as he stopped to talk to a policeman who was very friendly and concerned about him. He escorted him to the police station to question him, and that's when he had to tell him he wasn't from the area. Or he was, but he was not from the time period. Intrigued, the policeman asked him what year he thought he was from, and he gave the possibility of him either sitting in a police station in 1963 or lying in a hospital bed in 2024, and none of this being real. The policeman laughed at him for thinking he was from 61 years in the future and locked him up, telling him what he was saying couldn't be true. Matt decided to show him his driver's license to prove his identity. The policeman looked at it in confusion at the birth date. November 6, 1998, he thought. Matt then showed him his mobile phone, which was the latest model of iPhone, which wouldn't be invented for another 60 years, and he himself wouldn't be born for another 35. Upon learning Matt was telling the truth, the police released him and offered him protection, as he was going to be famous for being a time traveler. And sure enough, when the press found out about a young man from the future who was now stuck in a time that was not his own and reported on it, people wanted to meet Matt Bolan, the man from the future, and ask exactly how he ended up there. But that information was classified, so they started making up their own versions of the circumstances by which he ended up there. None of them were correct, not even close. How was he going to get home? There was no known way, other than to live through time until he'd aged back to that point.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 15th episode, and head over to the United States for our next story, the Bennett family. Steve and Julie Bennett were a happily married American couple with 2 daughters, 12-year-old Marcia and 10-year-old Melanie. They loved both their daughters very much. The unique thing about Marcia wasn't the fact she had red hair and wore all red clothes, but was the fact she had all sorts of special powers. Laser vision, super strength, a healing factor, super hearing, and divination being some of them. She didn't use them very much for her own safety as well as theirs. They didn't know or understand where these abilities came from, or how their 12-year-old daughter had developed them. Steve's younger brother Eric thought his oldest niece may not have been born on Earth, as did his wife Jenny and their daughter Erica. So they all walked into the woods Steve and Julie were walking through when they found Marcia as a baby. That's when they stumbled upon a space vessel parked among the trees and boarded to investigate it. Marcia remembered being in a protective space pod, and discovered an open space pod, which gave her a flashback to being in there as a baby. Steve joined her at the pod. "That's the space pod your mom and I found you in as a baby," he told her. She was shocked to learn she was an orphaned alien who was adopted as a baby. This must be the origin of her special powers. She was a member of an alien race, but which one? It didn't make a difference in the slightest, as she was their daughter, and nothing would change that. It didn't matter what genetics said, as Steve and Julie had adopted her when she needed someone, and raised her as a daughter for the last 12 years. They loved her very much, and she loved them too, and appreciated everything they'd done for her.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 16th episode, and tonight's story is Sweet Dreams. A mother was putting her children to bed one night, and was telling them one of her famous stories. Just as she finished the story, she tucked them in and checked them for any sneaky sweet treats. Her son Daniel was clean, not having snuck any sweets, but caught her daughter Cyan packing a stash of sneaky treats after finding a hoard of them in the toy box under her bed. "I'm sorry, Cyan, but I'm confiscating these. No sweets before bed. You'll have nightmares," she told her kindly. She kissed her children goodnight, wished them sweet dreams, and went to put the stolen sweets back on the shelves. She owned a sweet shop, and they lived in a flat above the shop. As the children slept, they found themselves in a land composed entirely of sweets and sugary snacks and drinks. However, these snacks and treats were anthropomorphic and human-sized, as if they were people in costumes. The houses were built from solid bricks of light and dark chocolate cemented with white chocolate, and the people who lived there, well, there were the aforementioned anthropomorphic fizzy drinks and snacks, but there were also giant jelly people working and playing. Gummy mothers were taking their jelly babies for walks, and each jelly baby had its own gummy bear. They met people made of chocolate, jelly, ice cream and baked goods such as cakes and cookies. This meant they couldn't eat anyone because that would count as murder and cannibalism in this world. And taking a bite out of anything would count as vandalism, so they walked carefully in an attempt not to accidentally destroy anything. At this point, they were noticed by a hungry candy kid and found themselves on the run. As they were chased by this candy kid, they tripped over but didn't hurt themselves, because they woke up in bed to find their mother sitting there, looking worried. She assured them it was just a dream and comforted.
Hello there, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 17th episode, and we have another story for you. It's time for First Day from Hell. Autumn had arrived in Midhampton, and the kids were returning to school after 6 long weeks off, and everyone had moved up a year.
As a new Year 10 at Midhampton High School, I had been made a lower senior prefect and was very proud of that fact.
This granted her a certain degree of authority over students, which she could hand out discipline cards and points for good behaviour as deducting them for bad.
I was settling into my new tutor room in Professor Jack Terrence's science lab next to my best friend Sahara Johnson, while Professor Terrence took roll call. It's going to be an interesting year, Lily, don't you think?
It was as the assembly bell rang that she was needed to help lead the Year 7s to the auditorium and show them to their seats at the front of the crowd before taking her spot on the stage by the headmaster's podium as he stepped out to give his usual welcoming speech. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a new year at Midhampton High School. It certainly is nice to see you all back and ready to learn more. Welcome to our new pupils in Year 7. We hope the next 7 years will be your happiest yet, he said just before an unruly year. 8 boy made booing noises, so Lily has to remove him from the auditorium.
What on earth do you think you're playing at, Joa Vincent? That was very rude of you to boo the head like that. I want to see you in detention this morning, break time in the quiet room. I'm on detention duty this morning.
She scolded before placing him in the quiet room until the bell to signal the beginning of classes rang. During that day, she had to sort out problems with misbehaving children and bullying, and even had to get clearance to give an after-school detention. It was turning into the first day from hell, as she couldn't get a moment's peace until she was at home that evening. She was so stressed out it got her upset enough to cry, and Millie and James tried everything they could to comfort her. Her 25-year-old sister Romana was even unsuccessful in calming her down, as was her 20-year-old brother Roscoe, unfortunately, so they just left her alone until she was calm enough to be around them. Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 18th episode, and now it's time for our third sequel episode. I Give You, The School Settles Down. 1 week had passed since the start of the new school year, and everybody was just now getting settled in. Lily Barat was still a lower senior prefect and was in a maths class at the moment studying algebra. As she was in year 10 now, this was a GCSE maths class, and she was in a higher skill set due to her abilities in her classes. She was one of the smartest students in her class, and this had been noticed by not only the school but the examination board as well. Ever since she'd started at Midhampton High, she had been a hard worker, and her behavior was always the best any student had ever displayed. In all her time there, she had never been in any trouble or any fights. The break bell rang, and she went out to monitor the playground as part of her prefect duties. As she patrolled the playground, keeping her eyes peeled for any sign of trouble, but right now there wasn't any. It wasn't long before she heard 2 Year 7 boys having a disagreement over their opinions of the hit new children's cartoon, The Wonderful World of Wilbur, with one questioning the logic behind the world the show took place in, and the other arguing that it was a fictional world, it didn't need real-world logic applied to it. She stepped in to defuse the situation before it escalated any further. She listened to both sides of their argument and thought carefully before delivering her judgment. Well, boys, I must say you're being rather silly to be having an argument over something so trivial as different opinions of a television series. Who cares if one of you likes it and the other doesn't? It's not worth falling out over, she told them. What should we do, Lily? Asked the boys. I suggest you both make up for this silliness and forget about it, Lily told them. The boys knew she was a very fair-minded person and didn't dare ignore her, so shook hands and made up. Thanks, Lily, they said. That's all right, boys. If I catch you arguing about something so trivial again, I will have to discipline you, Lily warned them. Mr. Turner approached her to congratulate her on the fair way she just handled the situation just then and agreed with her methods. As he went off to see a group of Year 9s, she was approached by another Year 7 boy. His name was Jerry Daxon. She listened to him and thought carefully before giving him her guidance. It sounds to me like you still need help settling in. Haven't you got any friends? She said. No, I haven't, replied Jerry. Why not? Asked Lily. No one in my year wants to be my friends, Jerry told her. Why ever not? Asked Lily, feeling sorry for him. They think I'm a jerk, he told her. Lily was shocked by what she'd just heard. What? They said that? She exclaimed. Yeah, kind of, he replied. Lily thought about it for a moment and then took Jerry to see his classmates about what they thought about him. She asked them to explain why they thought he was a jerk. Wait a minute, we don't think he's a jerk, Lily. We think he's a joke, Jack Sims told her. Why do you think he's a joke? Asked Lily. We think he's a joke because he's too shy to make friends with us, Maisie Gray told her. Lily looked from them to Jerry very thoughtfully. It looks like somebody got the wrong end of the stick, she said fairly, looking at Jerry. Knowing there was no point arguing about it, Jerry joined his classmates and apologized to them. Lily apologized too for jumping to conclusions, realizing her mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect, said a voice behind her. She jumped and swiveled round to find the headmaster standing behind her. Oh my gosh, sir, you made me jump, she exclaimed in Semajically AI. Episode 19, the day the town went silent. It was a normal day in the town of Midhampton, as everyone was busy doing their day-to-day activities. The town postman, Simon Hermison, was delivering letters and parcels to the locals.
And yes, I work for the Hermes Postage Company.
Some people thought he might be the Greek messenger god working undercover as a modern-day British postman. At the local leisure centre, Ty Donovan was busy working as a lifeguard at the swimming pool, as this was his job during term time.
I'd just pulled a child out of the water after I'd spotted her drowning and performed CPR on her.
He was relieved she was all right, but still sent her to the hospital to make sure she was going to be okay.
I keep a trident in my office, which makes people think I'm actually Poseidon, Greek god of the sea, working undercover as a modern-day British lifeguard.
At Midhampton High School, staff and pupils were busy teaching and learning.
There was their headmaster, Mr. Zeusman, who was seeing a student who was in trouble.
He kept a staff that looked like a bolt of lightning in his office, leading others to suspect he might be Zeus, king of the Greek gods, working undercover as their headmaster. It was then that something happened to make the whole town go silent. This was strange, as nothing like this had ever happened before. Nobody made a sound and no traffic passed by outside. Not a bird was chirping and not a plane or helicopter flew overhead. What was going on? It was like someone had pressed a giant mute button on them. There was no way to tell how long this was going on, as all the clocks had stopped as well. Everyone was frozen in time, and obviously nobody knew why or how this was happening. Before long, things went back to normal, but there was a strange boy standing in the middle of the corridor who certainly hadn't been there before. He was holding a golden antique pocket watch, which nobody noticed because he pocketed it before anyone could.
Who are you, young man?
The deputy head teacher, Mrs. Herriston, asked him, and it alone made others think she was Hera, queen of the Greek goddesses. Lower Senior Prefect Lily Barrett was acting on her duties, making sure the corridors were clear.
As she finished up, she went to her GCSE drama class with Mr. Capaldi, the teacher of the GCSE drama course, seemingly unfazed by what had just happened, as if she hadn't noticed. Semajically AI, Episode 20. Time-tossed, Bessie's bizarre adventure in the Stone Age. Bessie Turner was a young woman who was enthralled by history and worked as a tour guide at the Natural History Museum. She was in her element telling a group of A-level history students about the dinosaurs and how badly savage they were. She was telling them about how the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago and how they were wiped out by a comet. As she moved on to tell them about the cave people who lived during the Stone Age, she marveled at how short their life expectancy was. Their life expectancy was about 30 years. Imagine that, she told them enthusiastically. It was then that an anvil gave way and hit her in the head, knocking her unconscious. She began to see flashes of her life before blacking out completely. When she regained consciousness, she sat up and looked around in confusion to find herself sitting in a stony landscape. She stood up, not sure she believed what she was seeing. As she walked over to a rock to investigate, she found she could touch it. What's going on here? I can touch this rock. Is this real or is it just in my head? She thought to herself as she went looking for help to determine what was going on. Everything looked like it was how things looked in the Stone Age, about 100,000 years before Jesus was born. Could it be? Have I really been catapulted back to the Stone Age? She thought as she stumbled upon a tribe of cave people gathered around a rock. This confirmed her suspicions beyond all reasonable doubt. She had indeed accidentally travelled back in time to the Stone Age. How could it not be? She was staring at a cave tribe. She ran for it as she was spotted by the tribe leader. As she ran, her trainers made fiery tracks on the sand. She stopped running as she came to a lake and decided to go in for a swim. The caveman who had followed her watched her for a second before staring around himself to see flames forming around him. Realizing what she'd done, Bessie rushed to his aid, putting out the flames. Now she'd gone back to the Stone Age, met a caveman, helped him to discover fire, and invented a way to put it out, becoming the first ever firefighter. She then saw a light and woke up in a hospital bed in 2024, only to hear the nurse offering to put the Bessie on. "What's the Bessie?" she asked. "It's the fire, love," replied the nurse. A team of firefighters came rushing past the ward. "It's the Turner Squad," said the nurse. "Turner Squad?" asked Bessie. "Fire service," replied the nurse. And then she suddenly remembered having been thrown back to the Stone Age, caused a fire with her shoes and put out the fire with some water. "Of course," she blurted out, causing a stir around the ward.
Semajically AI, Episode 21, The Ogre Teacher. When I was in primary school and in the first half of Year 6, I had this teacher who was one of the worst teachers in the school. Her name was Yvette Rickman, and she was a right foul woman. Well, to put it correctly, she was nice to you when in a good mood. But it was when she was in a bad mood her true nature would show itself. She was a right ogre who would get cross with you for anything, including accidentally wringing a cloth on the floor. Here are some instances of that happening to me. The mosaic. We were learning about ancient Rome and the art of the mosaic, and she said we could make a mosaic of whatever we wanted. When she saw I was designing a mosaic of Poe from Teletubbies, she turned into the ogre and shouted at me, "What are you doing? That's not a mosaic." So I was forced to change it to a man. How petty and unfair was that? I didn't deserve to be yelled at for that. Following doctor's orders, what some of you might not know is that I have no hearing in my left ear. Well, when I was 10, I was about to have the grommets put in my ears, and the doctor had forbidden me to go near water, which meant I wasn't allowed to go swimming. Most of the teachers understood this and were very nice about it, but not Yvette Rickman, oh no. When she learned of this, she turned into her true form of an ogre and threw me in the timeout corner saying, "At Glenwood, you will have to go swimming, grommets or not. They'll just say, 'Get in there, boy.'" After a while of silence, she followed it up with, "Wimp." Then, seeing I was upset, she ended it by saying, "It proves what a baby you are. I'm exaggerating the parts in the stories where she became an ogre. But I'm not exaggerating the dialogue. It was what she actually said to me." So, can I ask, how exactly did that make me a wimp and prove what a baby I was? Well, it didn't. What it did prove was that this woman hated children, so why was she in a job that required her to teach and look after them? I was just following the doctor's orders. Disclaimer? Yvette Rickman wasn't actually the teacher's name. I'm just using it as a placeholder to keep her anonymous for her own. Semajically AI Episode 22, Jack's Incredible Gift. Jack was a young man who lived with his girlfriend Abby, who adored him. In fact, he worked in the drama team and had a very happy and one day, he found a £50 note and decided to try As he rushed out to the street, the car came speeding up beside him. The driver was staring at her from the other side of the room. Feeling uneasy by it, she decided to try and ignore it and watch television. She just felt more and more creepy. She went to check on the children and to her relief they were fine. She returned to the parents' house and saw the clown statue was staring at her with intent. Still freaked out, she collapsed on the bed and knocked out. The phone rang, waking her up in a fright. It was Ben calling to check on her, and noticing the panic in her voice, he asked if she was okay. Actually, I'm freaked out by your life-size clown statue staring at me from the other side of the room. Is it okay if I cover it over? What are you talking about? Asked Ben. Over that clown statue? Freaked me out, she replied. Jasmine, we don't have a clown statue. There was an intruder, dressed as a clown in the house. She rushed in. Ben and Martha rushed home to find the crime scene at their house. The police told them what happened, and despite all her efforts, Jasmine couldn't protect their children, who had been slain in their bed. A team of detectives were hauling out the intruder and loading him into a police van. I'm so sorry. Semajically AI episode 24, Death by Chocolate. One day, a young man named Leo was at a car boot sale looking for something to buy when he noticed a strange school he hadn't seen as he came in. It was a school that sold black market cult items like dolls, vanishing wardrobes, cursed chinaware and glasses, Ouija boards, haunted game parties, and all kinds of things sure shouldn't be sold at a public event like this.
Totally within my rights to sell my wares at this sale.
What if someone's child comes to look curiously at what you're selling?
No persons below the age of 18 are allowed to look at my store.
So Leo showed his identification, which was accepted without question. Leo spotted a single chocolate in a glass display case, along with the warning that said, "This chocolate is highly toxic. Do not touch or remove from this case."
How much do you want? $1,000? You mean like £1,000?
But I don't mean $1,000 or €1,000. Show me the cash and it's yours.
Without a second thought and no further questions asked, Leo paid £1,000 and walked across the room.
As he arrived at his friend Ben's house, they sat in the living room. He showed him the display case containing the chocolate.
I thought it cost me £1,000.
Ben laughed. You paid £1,000 for just a piece of chocolate contained in a display case? Unable to believe his friend's He saw the warning on the display case about the chocolate being poisonous, but ignored it, making to open the case.
Stop! Didn't you read the warning?
Ben removed the chocolate from the case in his bare hands and popped it in his mouth. The moment he did, he started to drink. His skin turned purple and he seized up.
Don't give me that. Just get rid of it, demanded Melanie. Jenny picked up the nearest brick and threw it through the web, knocking it down and killing the spider. Don't say you weren't warned, said they were gone. That night as they slept, a horde of spiders crept into Max's bedroom and set to work building a jumbo web, so sticky it was when Melanie got up to go and use the bathroom, she burst into the web, unable to see anything. She screamed for help, Max came up only to get stuck in the well, wrapped up in it, beaten to the blood. This was their revenge for the friends and relations they lost. Police were called the next day to investigate their deaths after a neighbour called in to find the jumbo spiders. The coroners came to free the bodies and take them to the morgue. All over town, reports were coming in about the bodies of Melanie and Max's friends found dead, wrapped in jumbo spiders' webs. The only one to escape was Denise Lyman. She was the only one never to give in to Melanie's demand to kill the spiders and end her friendship. This is just a work of fiction and an adaptation of a segment of a Halloween anthology. You can't actually get caught in spiders' webs.
Semajically AI episode 26 of Mid-Hampton. It was Halloween and all the teenagers and young adults were getting ready to visit the children around the neighborhood for trick-or-treating. Lily Barrett was leading little Abigail Jenny and Freddie Jenny. She was dressed as a shoe and 15-year-old on going to and complimented Lily on both her costumes and how very responsible she was being by ensuring the safety of the kids on the as she led them around. As time went on, they met other chaperones going around with their little groups and were impressed with their costumes. Lizzie Stratton, Lily's 16-year-old cousin, stopped to talk to them. She was dressed as a fairy princess, and the twins she was leading around, 6-year-olds Becky and as a prince and after 5 minutes, they parted ways. It is now nearly 8 o'clock.
Even Eric and Jenny were proud of all the girls for helping to catch a thief.
Semajically AI, episode 29, Time and Punishment. It was a fairly normal day for Tim Gumpher, a young man who was fascinated by anything to do with time travel. As a matter of fact, you could say more correctly, he was obsessed with time travel and was determined to find a way to prove it was possible.
Yeah, I just know it's possible. I have to find a way to make it happen.
He got his wish one day on his way home from work.
As he drove home, he stopped at the local convenience store to buy some coffee and crisps before getting in his car and driving on.
He couldn't help thinking about how he was going to set about proving time travel to be possible. He pulled up in his driveway, got out of his car and let himself into the house he shared with two of his friends, Maxine Jeffries and Louis Bowles.
As he walked in the front door, they welcomed him warmly and prepared to assist him with his next experiment.
He hooked up a wormhole generator he'd built from an old VCR, a satellite tube, a rotary telephone and a cable TV transmitter and powered it up.
Even though Maxine and Louis didn't think time travel could be achieved, they assisted Tim nevertheless.
Yeah, we may not believe it, but we're here to help you, Tim.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's see if we can make history today.
Once they'd set it up, they set coordinates for October 16, 1956 and hit the generate button on the screen. Then they dialed the year 1956 into the rotary receiving connection. A few seconds delay later, an electric blue portal opened in front of them.
Come on!
Tim shouted, and they all ran through, emerging on the other side in a very old-looking London complete 1950s era style cars driving around.
They found a newspaper and looked at its date 16th October, 1956.
Maxine and Louis looked at Tim in total shock and amazement as he'd done it.
He had done what they thought was impossible.
He'd proven that time travel was possible, and this they couldn't deny.
It was right in front of them, and they were currently standing in 1956 rather than 2024. Tim had actually transported them 68 years into the past. This was a danger to their very existence, as all their grandparents were teenagers in this time period, so they needed to be extra careful if they disrupted the timeline in some way. They were timed out and were returned to the present.
That's a relief.
At the last moment, two tall men in suits materialized in front of them, confiscated their time travel device and banished them from using it ever again because they had built and used it illegally.
These men were time agents, and this was their punishment for tampering with time.
Semajically AI, Episode 30, The Long Legacy of Doctor Who. Every doctor at Midhampton Hospital was pretty ordinary, but one doctor appeared to have worked there since the town medical practice was founded, and that was Dr. Julius Who. It appeared as though he'd been there for 2 centuries, which was nothing to scoff at, considering some of the town's citizens were literal immortals. Julius Who moved to Midhampton in 1824, the year after the town was founded. He was a newly qualified medical examiner who was looking to set up his own medical practice. He was welcomed very warmly by all the residents of the town and its founder, Midge Hampton, who lived in a mansion in the heart of the town. When she learned of his medical degree, she granted him permission to start his own medical center, knowing how desperately her town needed a doctor. So, he set up a small medical center in a building just big enough for him to practice his profession as the town doctor. It had a welcoming little reception area where his receptionist Phyllis Moore began working, a small waiting room where patients would wait for their appointments, his office complete with a desk, chair, and couch for his patients, an office for his assistant nurse Cynthia Wells, and a small ward just big enough to house 2 patients at a time. He was an exceptional doctor, even for a newly qualified doctor, as he diagnosed every patient correctly and helped them get better. He was only 26 at the time he started his medical practice. As the years went by, he treated many patients and cured so many illnesses and injuries. By 1864, after 40 years, his medical center had grown from a small town practice to a full hospital, complete with a full staff of doctors and nurses. All were new, as all of his old staff were now retired. Some of them had even passed on. But he, at 66 years old, was the owner of Midhampton Hospital, as well as its governor. Over the next 160 years, he ran his hospital from strength to strength, modernizing it along the way to keep up with the ever-changing world. He couldn't be happier than that. In 2004, he was awarded the Exceedingly Long Service Award for his many years of service to the medical profession. By this time, he was 126, and he started his practice when he was 26 years old back in 1824. People thought he was likely to end as a patient in his own hospital. And now, here we are, in 2024. This is him now, an extremely old and frail man who is now 226 years old, retired after 2 centuries of hard work and dedication. He is now a patient in his own hospital after being admitted here with complications of extreme old age. He's already a medical marvel, having been alive for over 2 centuries and worked for over 2/3 of his life. Just a decade ago, he was recognized as the world's oldest man to ever live at 216. The machine flatlines, and Julius, who has just died at 226 years old. We wholeheartedly bid farewell to a fantastic doctor and a marvelous man. This is his epitaph. Here lies Julius who, beloved doctor and dear friend, born November 5th, 1798. Died November 9th, 2024, aged 226 years. You will be fondly remembered. Rest in peace.
Semajically AI, Episode 31, Mozilla lends a hand. It was a beautiful, sunny day, and the Riley household was a very busy place, including young Mozilla, who was helping to clean up the kitchen with her teenage brother Bing.
As he washed the dishes, she put them away once they were done.
Once they'd finished that, she started cleaning out the guinea pig while talking to her.
Hey there, little one. Let's get you all cleaned up and comfy. Dusting,
She said, as she picked up a feather duster and started dusting the dining room, then the kitchen, then the downstairs hallway, then the living room.
Need some help there, Mozilla?
thanks, Dad.
With help from Siri, Alexa, and Bing, who dusted the ceiling while she dusted the mantelpiece and windowsill.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
You got that right, Mom.
Once all the dusting was done, Mozilla went with Bing down to the local convenience store to buy a small list of items for their parents.
We bought everything on the list from fruits and vegetables to sugar and flour.
When we got home, we put everything away.
Despite being only 10 years old, Mozilla amazed them all by her willingness to give up her free time to help keep the house clean. She thought it would be selfish if she went out to have fun with her friends.
We want you to have a childhood, darling.
We don't want you to grow up wishing you'd had a childhood.
I understand, Mom and Dad, but I love helping people.
They all admired her for her selfless attitude towards them and everyone else in town, and felt that she deserved all the friends she had.
That night, Alexa put her to bed and hugged her tightly for all her help and hard work that day. She then told her she needed to be outside having fun, which Mozilla agreed to do the next day if the weather was nice.
Alexa tucked her in, kissed her goodnight, and left her to sleep.
Far across the ethereal plain lies a land full of magic and love. It is a land inhabited by a species of cute little magical beings who are so small, a person would have to look at them through a magnifying glass. As it is, this land is kept so secret no human has ever seen it. This is Fairyland, and the species who live here are called fairies, obviously. As the fairies are so small in size, there are literally trillions of them here, and they have allowed us unprecedented access to their world, and are giving us permission to tell some things about them. First, They want us to let you know that all the classic children's stories you've heard about princesses and girls who get chased by bears and wolves are named after them because this is where they actually came from. That's why we call them fairy tales. They come from the mind of Pixette, the author fairy, a 2,000-year-old fairy who just loves writing and telling stories. Second, they want us to tell you how they are born and age. When new fairies are born in the stars and burst into life when it's time for them to be born. They remain in their infancy until they turn 73, reach childhood, and start fairy school at 74, where they stay and hone all their fairy magic until they turn 125, at which point they become adolescent, start going out on training missions, which earns them their wings by the time they turn 345, upon becoming young adults and graduating from fairy school. At 345, they reach young adulthood and start studying for their twinkling ceremony, which ends by the time they turn 500, when they begin their 12-year transition period, which goes on until they turn 512. At this point, they are brought before the elders who ordain them to full adulthood with the twinkling, the ceremony at which they experience their transformation into fully fledged fairies, and send them out on their first mission off-world, which is always 10 years long. Upon returning from their mission at 522, they are given a long rest period before officially joining the fairy councils and being assigned to their first jobs in fairyland. They reach middle age upon turning 1024, which gives them tenure in their jobs. They reach retirement age at age 2048, at which point they also become senior fairies. After retirement, they live peacefully until their twinkling dies out, and they die. So, they can live upwards of 10,000 years if their magic is strong enough for their twinkling to flare that long. It is against their law for fairies to fall in love with and have children with humans. It is a capital offence and will lead to their arrest, trial, conviction and execution by power draining and dusting for their act of treason against their kind. And finally, they are governed by the Fairy Council, and their calendar is measured by how many years it has been since their government was formed, and which council is in charge at the time, as the Fairy Council reshuffles every century and a new leader takes over. It is currently the year 1564 of the Council era, and year 64 of the 16th Council. That's all now, thanks for watching.
Semajically AI, Episode 33, Imagination Shopping Trip. Jack was a young boy who hated it when he was dragged off to go grocery shopping with his parents every Friday evening. They had to take him with them because it was too short notice to find a babysitter for him. This time he had a plan to help get through it without whinging about having to come with him. As they entered the supermarket, he imagined them entering a magical market filled with witches and wizards shopping for all kinds of fantastical items from all different kinds of magical creatures and mystical beings. He imagined them as a family of wizards coming shopping for a batch of magical items as his dad got a trolley, which was a magical cart that levitated 3 inches above the ground. As they went from aisle to aisle buying everything they needed, he imagined each aisle as a different part of the magical world they were in. For example, as they were buying fruits and vegetables, he imagined them walking through a magical forest in which the trees were actually stalks of broccoli, and the staff stocking the shelves were elves and goblins. In the bakery, the bread was transfigured to jump around making customers catch it first, and the fairy cakes would flutter into the trolley. The staff in the bakery were fairies and centaurs. Before he knew it, the shopping was done and they were on their way home. He looked out the car window and imagined the passing cars as magical carriages drawn by the most majestic unicorns. Aeroplanes flying overhead were Pegasus horses transporting witches, wizards and magical creatures across the world. As they pulled into their driveway, he snapped back to reality and was amazed to learn they were home from the supermarket. His parents were more amazed. He didn't kick up a massive fuss like he usually would have done. He told them he used his imagination to entertain himself, and they were pleased with him for finding a productive way to pass the time.
Hey there, kids. Today I've got an exciting tale about two adventurous siblings, Ted and Shelley. Now, Ted is a short, stocky boy with wild black hair and twinkling green eyes. He always wears round-rimmed glasses, a green crew-neck t-shirt, blue trousers and white trainers. And then there's Shelley, his tallish sister, with swirly brown blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes. She loves her pink dress with a white floral pattern, matching her white socks and pink shoes. These two are inseparable. They love playing with their friends in the park, exploring their neighborhood, and even sitting down to read the same books. Their favorite books? Oh, they're huge fans of Harry Potter, The Chronicles of Narnia, Mary Poppins, anything by David Walliams or Enid Blyton, and of course, Lord of the Rings. Right now, they're rereading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and they're up to chapter 20. After finishing each chapter, they sit and talk about it, sharing their thoughts and dreams about the magical world. Believe it or not, Ted and Shelley are known as the biggest book buffs in their whole school. But that's not all. These bright kids have just started writing their own children's novel, and everyone around them is super impressed. Can you imagine? Writing a book at their age. One sunny afternoon, Ted and Shelley decided to visit their favorite spot in the park. They found a cozy bench under a giant oak tree and dove into their book. As they read, they couldn't help but dream about being wizards just like Harry Potter. Suddenly, Ted had an idea. Shelley, what if we make our own magical adventure? Shelley's eyes lit up. That's brilliant, Ted. Let's create a story with enchanted forests, talking animals, and a quest for a hidden treasure. And just like that, they began brainstorming, filling their notebook with ideas. They wrote about a mystical land where anything was possible. With each word, their excitement grew, and they could almost see their characters come to life. As the sun set and the park grew quiet, Ted and Shelley knew they had something special. They smiled at each other, knowing this was just the beginning of their very own magical adventure. So kids, next time you pick up a book, remember Ted and Shelley. Imagination has no limits, and who knows, maybe you'll write the next great adventure. Happy reading. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more magical tales. See you next time.
Semajically AI, episode 35, Santa Claus is coming to town. All the little boys and girls must behave at this time of year if they want anything for Christmas, because a very special man is watching their every move. You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. Santa Claus is coming to town. Santa Claus is coming to town. We now cut to Santa's workshop at North Pole to see him and his elves hard at work, watching the children of the world to make sure they're behaving. Hello, what's Santa doing? He's making a list, he's checking it twice. Got to find out who's naughty or nice. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. Let's take a look around and see what we can see. It's truly an amazing place. Look at all the elves bustling about, doing all kinds of different jobs around the workshop. Let's get a closer look at some of the toys they're making. Little tin horn, little toy drum, a root-a-toot-toot and a rum-a-tum-tum, curly-haired dolls that coddle and coo, elephants, boats and kiddie cars too. So remember to be good if you hope to receive anything you wish to receive this Christmas. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. It's time to go now, as Santa needs to get ready to go out on his rounds, and he's coming to your town.